quick question because I want some clarifying context here. So, for the men that are listening, and does controlling access to money, let's say you're the breadwinner in your household, stay at home mom, and you're in control of the finances just because that's part of your day to day. You're managing the books, you're managing the business, you're
Right.
managing all the bills. I- In your mind, where is the line between
Good question.
acceptable control of money and unacceptable control of money as it relates to this, right? And I bring this up only because we'll get further into my kind of thoughts on it, but just being sure that you want to be a good actor, but you don't want to be such a good actor that it burns you later. So just what do
That's
you
a
think around
I
that?
mean, you've actually asked me a really tough question. I think there's like normal behaviors. Hey, what's the budget this week? Or how much did we spend at the grocery store? I mean, we all know eggs are like at a rising, like it's crazy. And also, I think that they have salmonella right now. But but the point is that there's a healthy way to manage and talk to your partner. And then there's one that's like, oh, this is what you spent, or where's the money, or did you take the money out of the house account, put it in your own account, and now you're basically being accused of being a thief. those
Sure.
are those are or where did the money go, every single minute of the day. And then it gets into another part of every single minute of the day, which I know personally that I survived from somebody asking me where I was every single hour of the day. And I had to literally send a pin. It's monitoring your phone, your location. What did you do all day long? Like you were gone for 5 hours. Well, you know, those kinds of things are a definite red flag, especially when you have to send somebody your pin all the time and they have your location constantly. But I think the biggest one for me, it was hard, was I was always being asked to turn over my telephone.
Mm.
Right? So
Mhm.
that right there was an issue, not because I had anything to hide, but because maybe possibly I was sharing what was going on in my life with my mother, my friends, and then I didn't want him to read the text messages because I knew that I was going to be in trouble, right? So
Yeah.
that's a huge one. The other one that's really scary that I did endure was they will threaten to take your children from you. Okay, I had a very small child, and he said to me, I was doing my thing, working for his business. We had several houses to manage and a small child. And he said to me, I will fire you. You will not have a job, and I will take you to court, and you will be unfit, and you will lose our child. She was 7 months old. Okay, so anybody that wants to try to literally take your child like that, they will also pull affection away. That's another thing that you might see. I mean, maybe they start sleeping in different beds out of nowhere. You're like, "What?" And that can look like different things as well. And then the other thing that they do is they threaten you with court. Like I
Yeah.
just said happened to me. I will take you to court, you will lose all custody, and I will show that you're unfit.
Yeah. So, okay. That's a pretty lengthy illustration of what coercive control is. Now, for those that are listening, the way I think about it is, some of those can be interpreted in a number of different ways, right? So
Right.
there is some ambiguous nature to it. But I think the ultimate point here is if you're doing it or you're doing any of these things, you need to reel yourself in and understand what it does do to the other party.
Right.
But just as equal, right? Let me give you an example. My wife and I share our location not because either one of us is controlling the other, but in these days, I think I have my family on Find My Friends. That doesn't necessarily turn into
No.
coercive control. But remember what you said, right? Lack of privacy, isolation. It's sort of one of those things, almost like the PD diagnosis, right?
Right.
It's not one individual symptom.
No. It's
You
like a
have to connect
bunch.
the dots.
All
Yes.
the things that are that's the control. And these
Yeah.
people that do it because they're so very insecure. You
Right.
know, and I can tell you, like, one of my clients, we're dealing with this right now, and they were very young children. There was I would say 2, 3-month-old baby and a 2.5, 3-year-old child watched the father yank the very small infant out of mom's arms, and he still says to this day, "Daddy stole the baby." Okay,
Mhm.
so he was using coercive control to take the child and then to hurt purposely the mother. You know,
Yeah.
and so I think that's a huge red flag in coercive control as well. They start small and then it builds up to other things. So you
Yeah.
don't realize you're giving your control away because you
Mhm.
think you're doing it for the good of the family, and then all of a sudden it just kind of blows up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's important, right? It's early identification. It's being aware of what it is. So if you're the victim of it, you can identify it. Maybe you
Mhm.
can have a conversation to nip it in the bud. Maybe you can't.
Right.
But taking the steps to ensure you're safe and your mental health is in a good place is important. And at the
That you
same
made
time, yeah,
such a good point. I want people to know that they think that they can stay and endure it. The longer that you stay, the harder it is to heal.
mhm,
The harder it is to get rid of those the trauma bonds, the triggers. So
yeah,
when you really see it, and I would suggest somebody going and seeing a therapist also
sure,
sometimes.
sure,
And but if you continually talk to your partner and things aren't changing, then you might need to think about it.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, yeah,
So let's talk about that for a minute. Like literally, it's so expensive when somebody just keeps filing motion after motion on you. The motion game, I call it, because then you have to respond, and your attorney has to respond, and so it just, I mean, the attorney's fees just it just keeps racking up. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And then if you end up getting past the motion game and you get into the court game and you've got hearings, there
Uh-huh.
isn't an attorney that doesn't book you for 4 hours, whether
Right.
you're in court for 10 minutes or not, right? And
Mhm.
4 hours at $500, there goes 2 grand.
Well, then let's think about also the preparation that they do beforehand that you get charged for. I mean, literally every one of my hearings was like 8 grand.
And this is, I think, the number one thing people don't recognize or consider when getting into the divorce process, what
Hmm.
the pure expense of legal fees is going to turn into to fight, right?
Right.
Um, and so we'll talk about mediation and those other options later, but it's one of those things that ensuring you know what you know and you know how you're going to go about it is really important.
Right.
Things that people don't think about as cost, at least initially, right, are opportunity costs, lost time for work, right? How many hearings, if you had a 9 to 5 job, did you have to leave or take off to go be in a courtroom?
Or I have one. How many times did you have to pay a babysitter to come when and watch your child if you were in a court hearing?
Exactly. And now
Mhm.
costs isn't always dollar cost, but emotional stress, right? That's an expense on your psyche. It's an expense
Right.
on your peace of mind. That's a really expensive part of this. It's stressful.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, parenting, right? It disrupts parenting for whoever happens to have the kids during that time, right? Because generally there's going to be a custody parenting plan in place, and so you're going to have to navigate that. You touched on it with babysitters.
Mhm.
And then financial planning to me is an expense because you get stuck in this paralysis state. So if you
Mhm.
haven't done some of these things going into the process, they get frozen, right? So you
Oh,
have
that's
to know what you have before you get there. You have to have, like you said, an accounting of, what do we make as a family? What do I make as an individual?
mhm.
What do we owe as a family? What do I
Right.
owe as an individual? These are all things that I think are really important to get because once you guys separate, and if it is contentious, the odds of getting it out of the other person are very low or very difficult, also
Right.
very expensive.
Well, and you made a really good point, and I want to make this to women is that you need to have an idea of what's going on with the family finances. You need to know, what you have, what's going on. A lot of people, sometimes women just want to sit back and let the husband handle it. And I think that it's important to be educated on what is going on in your life financially.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it sort of touches on what we had talked about in a prior episode around financial control. And I think
Oh, yeah.
in a lot of cases it's not necessarily an intentional control, but I think, legitimate family conversations around where do you stand economically?
Right.
If the man is the primary provider, ensuring that,
Mhm.
you guys are at least on the same page, you have some awareness. And by the way, as a man, if you are the primary provider, paying attention to certain signs. Listen, I know a lot of women who are in the ninth year, eighth, ninth year, and they're going, I'm out the second I hit that magic number 10, and I'm
Oh,
riding the
yeah.
gravy train for a long period of time because it turns into an extended
Most
spousal support
states.
scenario.
In most states, they take that into
Yes. Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah, of course. So I think it's one of those things where we just have to make sure that as long as everybody is open, clear, transparent, they understand where they're at, it's easy. But if it's
Right.
not going to be easy, making sure you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's. Divorce doesn't happen instantaneously, right? So if you're a woman or a man, there
No,
are things that you're thinking about. Start acting on those things. Start preparing. Secure another one, secure your logins, right? I have experience of folks
thank you for
going
that.
into my accounts
I did
after the
too.
fact, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So those are
I think
really
it's illegal, but yeah, secure your logins for sure.
exactly.
Why does it feel like your ex is winning before it even starts?
That's because it's the system, and ultimately, um, it's a chaotic, unknown process for a lot of people. So you automatically feel behind the eight ball.
Right.
And I would say, this is controversial, I'm sure, that if you're a man, you probably are behind.
Oh, I know you want to go there with that man thing, but every woman feels behind as well. And I think that everybody feels almost like a child being reprimanded in court. So they're coming at you from both angles. And I think each person feels that way.
And remember this, the court is designed, or the court feels like it's done a good job if both parties leave unhappy.
That's true.
It's a combat zone. So you
It's
feel
100%.
behind. It's risky all the time. Which, by the way, I just want to say one thing on that front. I'm a big advocate for negotiating and settlement and mediation. So if you don't have to end up in a courtroom with a judge up on a bench, do it.
I know,
Really
right?
pick your battles.
Honestly, I talked to one of my close friends, an attorney in one of my towns, and she said the same thing. I would so much rather go into mediation than let some sort of court appointed advisor, some type of court evaluator, custody or psych or whatnot, make the decision. I mean, they would rather have a mediator make the decision versus a judge because a judge just falls back on everybody else's recommendation.
Yeah, well, and to be fair to the judge and the system, they don't have the time to give
Well, they don't.
full attention.
No, they don't. And also, they're just, and this is my plight, they're not educated
Mhm,
in certain areas that they need to be. And
mhm.
maybe it's not their fault.
Yep, yep.
And then let's talk about something else. So, what do we do with? Because I think this is a good question as well. And we can open this up to our audience and our viewers, our listeners. What do we think that should happen to these judges that are handing over, like in the Washington case? I want to also bring up another case. There's one in Wisconsin where a protective parent, and again, it was a mother, the protective parent was in a situation where the child was being abused, ran to protective mom, and now the courts have put her in jail. This is a horrifying thing. And I think aside from focusing on mom versus dad, we talk about protective parents. And
Mhm.
protective parents need to be listened to in court. And if they're not, then should judges be accountable? And how would they be accountable?
I don't know how we'd hold them accountable other than taking them off the bench.
Right.
But they receive so much power from the bench that they're very hard to reach. And family law, generally speaking, is so discretionary, right?
Hmm.
We get statutes and codes, and we're supposed to follow the guidelines and the rule of law. But
Right.
these judges all the time can go in a complete opposite direction on the code or the law and make a discretionary argument or interpret it through a
Right.
different lens. And
Right.
when they issue their rulings, they do so in a way that they're literally issuing the ruling in preparation to defend an appeal.
Well, and here's what happened in Wisconsin is that she won in appeals court, mom did, and then the lower court, family court came back and said no
Mhm.
and still put her in jail.
Yeah,
So I mean, and this is that's a crazy case. That happens, I would say, probably not very often. I don't know how that was even allowed. Um, but we're seeing it right now in Arizona, where legislation is now again listening and hearing and doing trials and listening to people. And I'm actually going to post one of the people that testified yesterday. She was an expert witness and she was all the way from New Jersey. She flew all the way to Arizona to talk. And I'm kind of amazed by the state that they're allowing people to do this and listening to everyone's cases because they want to change and fix family court and they want to do things in 2026 better. So I think that's a great thing. But I'm going to post it because she literally talked about how she feels. And she's an expert witness, and she's been in more than like, I don't know, it was almost 50 states that she's been an expert witness. And she said, like, absolutely, across the board, every single family court system is broken.
100%. Let's give folks a general definition free of charge, right? Separate separate property is anything that you acquired before marriage, anything that is an inheritance or a gift, and anything that is post separation. Now, here's the thing. This happens all the time. Somebody walks into a marriage with a certain amount of separate property, they
Right.
build a life together, and now you start having some of those separate assets spill into your
To
community.
improve a piece of property that was separate with
Mhm.
community. Mhm.
Yes, and then it goes the other way, right? The community
Yeah.
builds something and it starts going out into separate assets. And now, by the way, that is
This is called
something that,
commingling.
yes, exactly
Yeah,
right.
commingling.
Commingling. But it
Yeah.
is something that plays a major role in the divorce process because those are complexities that add complexity to the case. There's a lot more to argue about. And so
Oh,
just
yeah.
making sure that as you get into this divorce mentality, you're in a place where you can recognize what you have as a community, right? What you've built during your life together and what you had separately.
And that's hard, and you sometimes have to trace assets. I think this just begs the question for me, and it brings something up that, you know, is it best to have some type of a prenuptial agreement before?
I love that question because in my mind, I think every single
I do.
marriage should have a prenup.
I agree 100% with you. Yes.
It, and let's just kind of divert into that conversation for a second. I think that it makes sense for both parties because there are expectations, there are protections. It removes concern, it removes nefarious behavior,
Mhm.
and it removes the incentives to separate.
Right.
Right? Because in separation, you're left with the opportunity to let somebody else decide. If you have a prenup, your decisions are made and it's made between the two of you,
You've already
versus
made
adding the state or a mediator or anybody else who can
that.
use these random laws and statutes to impose something that maybe you didn't want had you
Right.
guys just agreed in a prenup going into it.
Mhm. I agree.
So,
I think they're
um,
very, very important.
yeah, no, and even to the extent that in some cases, if you're in early into your relationship, consider a postnup, consider getting one done.
Or a
Um,
cohabitation agreement.
yeah, yeah,
Those are
absolutely.
yeah.
I love that point. I don't think enough of us do it.
Mhm.
I think it costs everybody more money, and I think that's something else that sort of parlays into the next topic, and that is the community property is the community property. So when you get into a divorce, generally one side or the other or both have expenses, attorney's fees. Let's use that as the example.
Mhm.
And generally, the the higher earning party is going to have some level of responsibility to pay the fees for the other side. But
Yep.
remember, if you're fighting and you're paying attorneys for either side,
It's still
subject to
coming out of
reimbursement
the same.
or reallocation, all you're doing is you're draining from that community pot. So
Mhm.
what you want to split later is going to be less. What
Mhm.
you want to leave to your kids or give to your kids or help your kids with is going to be less. So
On.
just because you, man or
Mhm.
woman, have the other party paying for fees doesn't mean you're not paying for it. It's coming out of the community.
Oh, absolutely. It's draining the things that your children could enjoy, you know?
100%, and you see it all the time, and I think that goes to the point of there are absolutely things that you have to understand. When it comes to divorce, it's not just pure equality, right? It's not going to be fair for either side. And so, if you can get into that mentality, have a coach work through kind of what to
Coach.
expect, it makes it a lot easier. You'll probably save in a lot of places that you don't have to argue some of these tedious things. By the way, here's just a pure net benefit conversation. If it's a $10,000 argument, right, a $10,000 asset that you're going to argue over, figure out how to split it, even if you take
Because
less of a split, because you're going to spend 10 grand
I
fighting
was
over it.
gonna say it's not worth fighting over it. Not at all.
Exactly. And by the way, no offense to attorneys, they're not going to tell you to stop fighting over it because they're not incentivized to do that. They're
Mm.
incentivized to represent your interests. Your interest is a portion of whatever that is. You're going to pay them over here and
Yeah.
you're going to split whatever it is left.
And there'll be
So,
nothing left then.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
How many lies? This is interesting. Can someone tell in court before anyone actually cares?
That is so remember, folks, family law is a unique environment and in my opinion,
Very.
more often than not they get away with lying and nobody cares almost all of the time. But
Yes.
being organized and being able to focus on the biggest lies is where you have the potential of making people care.
Right. Well, okay, so now you just brought up so many issues I have to unpack. So what you just said was all the issues, focus on the right ones because in law school you guys we called it the red herring. So they'll
Mhm.
like put you in a direction that doesn't matter, but you're upset because you're being accused by these things or whatever. But really that's not going to win your case. So don't focus on that. Focus on being the primary good parent, all those things. But again, lies. Let's talk about it. I feel like some people, if you're in discovery, it's a great place to show that somebody's lying. Like, there's just no way. If you go into deposition, I mean, there are some funny situations where you can be like, oh, so it sounds strange, but do you remember this email that you sent on such and such date? And you called your co parent, blah, 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 but you say you don't verbally abuse her. So I think that's a good way to get the lies out.
Sure.
They come to fruition at some point, you know. And then here's the other issue is too is in the beginning I think there's something that I like to call like throwing the spaghetti against the wall. Like they will throw everything against the wall to see what sticks.
Totally agree. And ultimately for me, it's not really where I tend to guide people to focus their attention. I just go into every situation anticipating the other side to lie through their teeth. And so that's a harsh reality of the situation that I think most people experience, and it's why it's one of the questions we got.
Yes, it is interesting. I mean, I do remember even in my own case and with all my clients' cases, and it's interesting because my clients are like, but they're lying. I said, I know they are, but guess what?
Mhm.
That's what their attorneys are supposed to be doing right now. Is they're making up every possible lie because they're hearing stories from their client and they're believing them until they don't.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Right.